Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is episode number 39 of Coffee with Campus Consultancy. Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. If you are tuning in, this is Thursday morning, which we're playing with time zones, having the amazing Jeff on today, who you'll meet in a second from Canada, 8 a.m. in Melbourne in Australia. The early afternoon, Jeff? In Canada
3 p.m.
3 p.m. on the west coast of Canada and the US, if you're joining in from the States or from Canada. So welcome one way or another. Today, we're going to be talking about a really cool topic, and it's going to get really, really practical around when we start a business, how do you sell your first product? And what's all the stuff that goes into selling that first product? What are the things that we wish we did before we even started the business? Where does the inspiration come from when you're really amped to start a product or a business? What are the practical, tangible steps you need to do or you could take to get that first product out the door? So we'll be talking about all of that and more, and introducing you to our wonderful Jeff. Golly, it's early in the morning. Look, I'm just going to say, I'm going to show you who Jeff is in 2 seconds after this quick introduction, and I'm going to have a sip of coffee while we wait. After that, a very smooth introduction, Jeff, my friend. Thanks for joining us today.
Dude, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Nice to finally get on with you.
Yeah, I know. It's super, super nice. And after years of wearing the clothes and using the hashtags and everything in between, it's awesome to chat with you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate all the support from you guys. It's been awesome.
Of course. Tell us a little bit about where it starts. So you've got a really interesting backstory, and it actually has a little bit of Australiana in it. So I'd love to hear for people joining, people who are listening and wondering, who is Jeff? What is LL Supply? Where did your story start with everything?
Yeah, it's got a lot of Australia in it, actually. It's I did like the classic 1 year working holiday in my early 20s and just fell in love with the country and ended up living there for almost 5 years. And it was awesome. We lived in just north of Sydney, and it was but one of the best experiences of my life. And so the actual idea for the company started in Australia, but it wasn't really a clothing company. For everybody who doesn't maybe know what LL Supply is, we make upcycled and recycled clothing from pre-consumer and post-consumer waste. So we don't use any virgin material in our products. There you go. Right on. So it's a more sustainable way of making clothing. We're kind of avoiding all the agricultural and material production aspects of clothing production, which are pretty heavily taxing on the environment. So but it didn't start like that. It actually started out, I was mostly traveling at the time. I was actually working as a landscaper, and I kind of had a really strong passion for photography and writing. So LL stands for Lifestyle Over Luxury, and that's actually a blog that I started. That was how it originally began, so to speak.
No way.
Yeah. So we had a mini ramp in our backyard, share house, like five of the boys living in a share house, and we built a mini ramp in the backyard, and that got spray painted on the mini ramp, and that's what we named the blog. So tell us a little bit about that in a second. And we've got a couple of people jumping in saying hello. So Lily, good morning. Rupali, good morning. Lovely to see you both there. If you've got questions for Jeff as well, starting a business, starting a blog, selling t-shirts, traveling around the world for 5 years, if you're curious about that, and how do you do that and how does that start, jump in the comments and ask, and we'll bring you on. Jeff, tell us a little bit about that idea of, I think, two things there that are really interesting. One, people get really hung up on names of things. And Lifestyle Over Luxury is an awesome name, but also I know that you've sort of pivoted away from that a little bit currently. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to know about that, what that phrase means to you. And two, the idea of starting a blog, like putting something creative out there, telling your story as like it's a pretty big creative step. Lots of people go through life and never create a blog or never create a plan. So what does Lifestyle Over Luxury mean to you? And why did you start that first blog? Yeah, so we actually spent ages trying to think of, like you said, people get hung up on the names. I spent ages trying to think about what we should call this blog. I wanted to start something, and I was trying to think of something cool. You're looking at Deus and Quickie and all these different brands, and you're like, I need a cool name like that, and something that we can stand for. One of my buddies actually, that was one of the things that stood out for me. He's like, you don't just pick a name because it's cool, man. Pick something that like means something and stands for something. So I probably racked my brain for like a month about what can we stand for, and it was just like such a backwards way of approaching it. Like, what can we stand for? Try to find something. And same mate actually said, what do you already stand for? Like, what's important to you? Like, what have you, and that's where Lifestyle Over Luxury came from. I before I started traveling, I was going to school to be an investment banker. I was obsessed with, just business and wealth, and the total opposite of what I kind of found traveling. Like, that, or I don't really use that old cliche, you find yourself when, and all that. But I certainly like had a little bit of a reorganization of priorities. So, that's really where it came from. And like, valuing your lifestyle over the things you own and buy. And, it's not about being necessarily poor, but instead of owning, being mortgaged to the hilt and having a Ferrari in the driveway, like live in a smaller apartment and take 5 or 6 trips a year and explore the world. And, so that's kind of what it really started as. And yeah, putting it out at first on the blog was definitely like scary. I think I was so amped that I like just, went running into the dark room blind, like, without any second thoughts. But it never intended to be anything really. When at that point, I just wanted something. I had family and friends abroad. I wanted to share my photography. I had a couple features on like the Inertia, Magic Seaweed. I was submitting stuff to Surf Mags. We ended up having a video on Stab and that. And like, it was, it was just my name. It never led anywhere. So I wanted to have like my own place where people who liked the stuff that they saw on other platforms could come and be like, oh, check out this guy's like got some sick photos and, cool stories and that. So that's what it originally started out as. It was never really intended to be a clothing company from day one. Although it like pretty quickly kind of morphed into that idea.
Yeah, interesting. So I love that. And I want to get into the morph and the launch of it. One of the things you mentioned before we got on today was this idea of it doesn't have to be getting super amped about a product or a brand, and the first thing you do being just like launch it out of nowhere, because it's a quick way to make a lot of mistakes, which is good. It's a good learning curve, but there are also some other ways to go about it. So if someone was listening today and they were thinking, okay, maybe I've got an idea for whether it's a t-shirt company, whether they want to sell coffee cups or microphones or whatever they want to sell, whatever difference they want to make in the world. Is there anything that in hindsight, you kind of wish maybe not wish, but you think, oh, if I was speaking to somebody else who was going to do what I was going to do or what I did, you would give them advice to start at a particular point or consider having a certain experience before they launched into creating their own business?
Absolutely. I did, just for the record, what I'm about to recommend, I did not do.
I love this. I'll take it with a grain of salt, but
yeah, take it with a grain of salt. I didn't do this, but you know what? Wish wouldn't be at a line to say. I probably wish I had done this because I think I could have avoided a lot of, costly mistakes. So people ended up liking the name and they were like, you should put it on hats, t-shirts. That's how it started. And then I went down the rabbit hole of being like, well, part of what we stand for, I stand for personally is like, caring about the environment and the places that I've fallen in love with exploring. Most Australian, you go to Indo, you go to Southeast Asia, you see the garbage, the problem that is so out of sight, out of mind for us. So that was big, which sent me down the rabbit hole of sustainable. So without having really any experience in the clothing industry whatsoever, we started a clothing company. And that would be my first recommendation. And I've shared this with other people that have come to me for like that startup advice. If you're just thinking about selling something online, you can probably dance around and like learn the ins and outs of that. If you're more interested in starting like a long-term business in a specific industry, whether it be, apparel or any major kind of industry, I would highly recommend getting a job in the industry for an existing company. Yeah. It's when you have that first business idea, you're jacked up. You just want to take it to market like tomorrow, and a lot of times that's can be, a mistake or end up causing, a lot of unnecessary expenses for yourself through the startup stage. So my recommendation, even just go be an intern for 6 months, go work in the, packaging and warehousing, shipping of a bigger brand, whatever you can do. You don't have to go in and, be the marketing director, but just having that exposure and that understanding of even, a good portion of the supply chain could be hugely beneficial and save you a lot of money and mistakes. So that's always my recommendation. It's hard when you have that idea to take the step back and be like, okay, I'm going to spend 6 months, letting this incubate, and I'm going to go work for minimum wage. That's a really hard thing to wrap your head around, but trust me, the money that you are going to save by learning just the basics about any industry is, a lot probably.
I think that's great advice. And it's something that I almost did the opposite way, but using the same principle, where I didn't really know what industry, I didn't have the big idea, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. And then I jumped into an industry that I did, as you say, really aligned with what I stood for and what I believed in. And in sort of the education space. And then when I was in that industry and I was kind of poking around, I was just in there like detective style looking for problems. And then I found one, and I could learn, kind of use the phrase, it's a bit kind of on the nose, but like learn on somebody else's dime, where someone was paying me to do a job and I was doing that job. But then my interest and my eyes were looking like, oh, what's over here? What's here? What's going on over there? And I could kind of get really curious. And then I did like a night school course for 6 months while I incubated the idea on top of a full-time job. And like 2 benefits of that. One, I wasn't like pot committed at the start, so I didn't like overvalue my ideas. I could sit back and be a bit more critical. And then the second thing was I saved money. Like it's a really important part of the process of like having some money in the bank, So even 6 months at minimum wage, like if you can save a couple of grand doing that, those couple of grand really come in handy when it's getting some public liability insurance or setting up a website or getting a developer in to do some back end on the checkout or whatever it happens to be. That little bit of money goes a long way sometimes.
Yeah. And that's exactly, from my perspective, I didn't do that. And I had that learning experience while trying to run a profitable company. So I went in with this like rose colored glasses of like, oh, we're going to change the industry in this way, this way, this way. Well, in reality, at the end of the day, after getting in and experiencing the industry, half of those ideas weren't even valid ideas. It was like, oh, that doesn't work. So I paid the price for figuring that out while I was also trying to, start and get into a profitable position as a company. So that is, you're going to have that experience. You're going to, whether you do it, like you said, on someone else's dime, or you do it through learning experience of working for another brand, or you do it working for yourself. Going into an industry, you're going to see so many holes once you're already there. So, I highly recommend getting there on, before you actually start your own. Because if not, what you end up doing is what we did. And, the first 6 months to 12 months, we pivoted the company in like 3 different directions because we were like, oh, there's a better way to do this. Oh, there's a better way to do this. So it actually like stifled our growth. I could have went to work for someone for 6 to 8 months and probably skipped all that.
Yep. All right. I love that. That's really, really interesting. I think that's really practical advice too. And for lots of people who are going to uni, not going to uni, wondering what they're going to do with their lives, an amazing amount of students come out of university in a whole bunch of debt, no clue about the future direction. And I think this is such a good idea of, if you are interested in something, that idea of going and working for someone and just learning, experiencing it. And if you don't like doing it 9 to 5, starting a business where you do it 5 to 9 might not be the right route. I think it's nice to know that and get that sort of foot in the door.
Definitely.
Cool. Mate, talk to me a little bit about this idea of the combination of not just making a profitable business, but also trying to do social good and really baking in the values and your unique way that LL Supply makes the world a better place as well. Like I think your advocacy work is incredible. Your Instagram is amazing. The messaging that comes out is a social good in and of itself. Like the awareness raising is brilliant. But you guys go a step further with supply chain and also the benefits for every product sold. So can you talk to me a little bit about why did you decide on that model of supply chain and that model of impact?
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate the kind words. It's what really spawned that was really like an outside look at the industry initially and saying like, kind of why is no one doing this, in the first place? That's what sparked the idea was, can you do this and also have a profitable business? It's not completely unheard of in the industry. You do have some industry leaders that have been around for a long time. Patagonia, a great example. even some newer companies, Vizsla's doing some really cool stuff, Offends with their like hemp stuff. So there is some, but for the most part, a lot of like the bigger, larger brands just weren't even paying attention to this stuff, which blew my mind because, myself, one thing about our company is that I'm the target customer. So that makes it very easy when you're like, what am I looking for that I can't find? Well, one, I like buy throwaway t-shirts and I can't find clothes that, last as long as I'd like them to, or take the, punishment, so to speak, that I put them through with, travel, surfing in them, skating in them, whatever. So that kind of sparked it. And then it was also like, well, I don't want to keep just chucking stuff away. So how do we solve that problem? So, I mean, we really approached it from like a problem solving perspective. The environmental thing was the backing of it, but it was more like, at the end of the day, I think every business should approach it as you're like trying to solve a problem for the customer, right?
Yeah.
Here, when we say this, when we discuss it, like when you're on selling points, like I wish environmental was first, but it's probably fourth, especially in clothing. If we're really being honest, they pick because style, price, brand, and then sustainability. So, yeah, when it comes to, that's a really hard balance, is the profit. That's a tough balance, profit and social good. Especially if you're not choosing to run a nonprofit, if you're trying to run a for-profit company and also having social good, that's a hard thing to do. And like a lot of the time, I mean, when we first started out, like I think we'd committed to, a certain amount of sales to beach cleanups, and like I wrote that check out of my pocket the first time. The company couldn't afford it, but we'd committed to it, so like I went into my bank account and wrote the check.
Yeah, so wow.
It's a really hard thing, especially when you're starting up. You need to have like a really, really strong business model that can support it, and like particularly cash flow if you're going to have a social component to your company, especially if it involves donating funds. We didn't really set that out as strong as it should have been at the start. And again, a lesson learned that, maybe could have been avoided. But it was really like going back to the core of your question. It was a personal thing. Like I wouldn't have run a company any other way. I believe in this personally, and I feel like doing it, running a company that didn't have that aspect to it would be, a bit of a sellout move, for myself. So that's what sort of inspired it originally.
And that totally makes sense. Especially, I love the idea of what am I looking for that I can't find, and across any industry. Like if you as a consumer are frustrated with anything, that's a business opportunity. I had a good buddy of mine on the other day, Alex, who maybe 2 weeks ago on a Monday, and he was saying one place that he went originally, he started like I always get this mixed up, like a hemp infused face cream or something like that. And the place he went for the inspiration was he went to product reviews on websites and looked at all the worst reviews and checked out from the worst reviews, like the 1-star reviews, what are customers saying they don't like about products. And I was like, that's such an interesting way to do it, right?
Yeah, that's very cool.
Like, if you're going to launch headphones, okay, go to the 5 biggest headphones, find out what people don't like about them, and then like make the opposite of that or try to solve that problem, which is
brilliant.
Which is interesting, right? And so I think one of those things there where you say like style, price, brand, environment, one of the many things that I love, if I could bring up another one of your pages, on lifestyle, and you led me perfectly into it because it's something I wanted to talk to you about today. This idea of just how, when it comes to style and brand, something that lifestyle does amazingly well, it's just the branding and the images. And it makes a little bit more sense now, your idea of photography and blogging and videos. But like the photos are beautiful, and you make the products. This is one of the things I wanted to ask you about from someone who from you being so good at this. How do you think about like what is the role of branding and photos? Is the product the hero of the image? Is it an aside? Does it facilitate the adventure? Like when you think about branding and the role of your product in those beautiful images and all the branding you do, how do you think about it? Like how are you trying to position your brand in those images?
Yeah, good question. So this is like this kind of moves into like the creative direction side of the company, which I personally think is really important to set out as like from day one. So when I do consulting for other companies and brands, one of the first things that I always ask them is, do you have brand guidelines? Do you have a branding deck? And that's really where this kind of comes from. Like this aesthetic sort of comes from us is, we spend a lot of time saying, okay, here's what we want our brand to look like, and that is an answer to who the customer we're selling to. So that's where it all starts. Starts at your customer. You build that customer persona. Who is our core customer? And obviously your net's going to fall wider. So let's say, just for example, you say your customer is similar to ours, is 25 to 40 years old, primarily unmarried, college educated. You build that whole profile and you say, okay, what is important to these people that is buying our brand? What do they like? And then how can you implement your own creativity into that to create something that's unique, and also is going to appeal to that consumer base. And again, I was fortunate enough that like I wasn't approaching this from an outside perspective, analyzing a market. Like I was and am the market. So, for me, it was like, what do I think is cool? What do I like to see? What's important to me? And yeah, it's a really hard thing. Like we spend a lot of time on that creative direction, especially once you get to a point where I did, where I couldn't manage it anymore myself. So we had to hire a creative director and photographers, and then relaying your vision to them, that like brand guidelines and having those mood boards, those color schemes, the logos, how, outlining how your brand voice is relayed to the customer, like having that package is really, really important, because you'll always go back to that when you're building out anything from Instagram, website, photo shoots. So that's a really important thing to have like out of the gate.
I love it. Jeff, question coming in here from Lizzie on where do you sit with ethical packaging and other manufacturing waste management?
So, okay, I'm gonna try to interpret this. I think it means like
embedded in there.
Yeah. So as far as ethical packaging, there's so many options out there. This is one of those things that like blows me away that other brands aren't doing. I mean, I hate to smash. I love Patagonia. I don't want to say a terrible thing about them, but I ordered a shirt from them maybe like 8 months ago. I got it in a plastic poly bag, and I was like, what? Like, why? There's so many better options out there. Why is this still industry norm? And what it comes down to is cost. But I mean, there's biodegradable plastic poly bags for clothing now. We ship in all biodegradable recycled packaging. So we basically ship in a specific type of cardboard that can biodegrade. We use tape that is a sugar derivative, so there's no plastic in it, and it also can biodegrade. So there's a lot of different options for packaging that are available that really just aren't being used simply because they cost more. And that's really where it comes to like educating the customer to be like, hey, if you're not going to do this, I'm not going to order from you, because that's the only really real way that brands are going to be pressured to change that. If it costs them 3 or 4 times more to ship in a specific type of box, if they don't have any pressure to do that, there's a very small amount of brands that are going to take that initiative and, quadruple their packaging cost, or sometimes even more than that, for just out of the goodness of their heart. They are out there, but they're a small group compared to the big. So as far as ethical packaging, I think there's a lot of options. There's not enough of them being used. I think we have a blog on this on our. I'm pretty sure there's one on our journal about packaging and manufacturing. As far as manufacturing waste management, I mean, that's really what we do as a company. So we take manufacturing waste and we turn it into a limited edition product. So in the apparel industry, there's billions of pounds of material brand new material thrown away every year because end of roll, discontinued colors, pulls. There'll be a pull through half of 1,000-yard roll, bolt of fabric, and they're not going to sort through that. So there's tons of different ways where there's waste at the manufacturing level. That's a lot of the stuff that we source comes from that. We'll get 200-300 meters, size like volumes that other brands tend to not work with. And then we boutique manufacture that into a limited edition piece. So as far as manufacturing waste management, I mean, that's kind of what our company does. I think the interesting thing is, for the most part, manufacturers are pretty motivated to not have manufacturing waste because it is a cost for them. So it does happen, and there are opportunities to create solutions in small capacities, which is what we do. But again, money is the most motivating factor, and that's a loss on their income statement is fabric loss. So for manufacturers, for any industry. So generally, companies are pretty good at trying to mitigate that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things I would love to hear from you, once you've got the vision, you've got the brand. I mean, obviously it's all evolving and building. When it comes to getting that first product out the door, what did that look like? Were you selling? Was it your buddy started buying T-shirts? What did it look like to get the first kind of product out the door? And maybe to someone who didn't originally know you and wasn't like, all right, I got half a dozen of Jeff's T-shirts and hats in the back of the car. Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so one of the things that we kind of did right is we really like led up to the launch of the brand. So we started an Instagram, we started a Facebook page. As I said, like, I had the blog, we had the website, so we were publishing stuff like long before we created a product. So one of the things we did well was create a little bit of an audience pre-launch and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Here's what's coming. So there was interest before we ever launched a product from, again, like everybody starting off, it's going to be mostly your family and friends, but we had a decent amount of, I don't know, maybe like 1,500 followers or something. I can't remember what it was, but for starting out, I was pretty stoked about it. So a lot of those people I didn't know. So there was a little bit of kind of a lead up that helped with that. I mean, the first product that we made, we made hats, and they were the shittiest hats ever. I think we made like 50 of them, and I got them in and was like just immediately like, oh, like they're so bad. So I think we just like gave those away to our friends, and like and then went back to the drawing board and we're like, okay, we got to, that's not how you order. And this is, again, one of the mistakes you could kind of avoid if you went and worked for someone else and understood a little bit about supply chain, where products come from, what to look for, QC issues and stuff. So it's we didn't do that. So the first products, but then the second round that we sourced, we got samples and we checked stuff and began to learn a little bit more of the process, and that was that was the products that we originally started to sell. But we had, I was really fortunate that again, we built that little audience, and we had a ton of support from day one. So I think, the first time somebody that I didn't know bought the brand was the first day that we launched. And that was a pretty cool feeling, to see those first sales come in, especially from people, you see like 3 or 4 friends, and then somebody you don't know, spends like $100. And that's like the greatest feeling in the world, that somebody that you have, no idea who they are, just like, handed you over their hard-earned cash for something you've created. So that was, I'll never forget that. That was pretty special the first time that happened. But we had a great launch. I mean, we did, at that time, I felt like was a lot of money for, launching. So we were pretty stoked on that.
Mate, amazing and well done. That's so cool. In terms of, and I know we're sort of coming towards time a little bit. I'd love to hear what, for a brand that started as lifestyle over luxury, what does that lifestyle look like, or how has your lifestyle changed over the years? Is it something that, you thought, oh, if I run this brand, life's going to be like this, and it's actually not like that at all? Obviously, we're coming through COVID and these different kind of issues and whatnot. So I'd just love to know the practicalities of running a business, and that business growing and changing, hiring people, everything in between. What does that lifestyle look like, if people are curious?
Yeah. So I started out rose-colored glasses. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to work my own hours. I'll surf. I'll travel tons. Like that was, the reason that I started it essentially was to build that, that freedom for me. It is the complete opposite of that. I always like to share, I don't know whose quote it is, but, become an entrepreneur, you get to pick which, you get to choose your schedule and pick which 80 hours of the week you work.
Yeah.
And like that. Nothing has been more true, even as the company got bigger, it's been a challenge to balance work-life, work-life balance. But that's part of entrepreneurship. Like you talk to anybody, like that story is not unique. There's, passive income. There's no such thing as
Doesn't
passive
exist.
income. So it's, yeah, I mean, you got to be willing to put in the hours, and that's really, it's really important to do something that you truly believe in and are actually passionate about. Because, you know, when it comes to, you know, going to bed at 3 a.m. and getting up at 6 for presentations or meetings, or, you know, that's hard to do if you don't believe in the product that you're selling. So, yeah, I mean, it's entrepreneurship has become a very, very glamorous thing in the last maybe like decade. And, you know, that's probably, you know, a little bit misleading. It's not that glamorous. It's a lot of hours sitting on your ass in front of depending on what you're doing, sitting on your ass in front of a computer, making a lot of mistakes, costing a lot of money, maybe not getting paid for a couple months. There's, yeah, I mean, you're the last one. Leaders eat last. If you're the one owning the company, you will be the last one to be paid. So
yeah,
it's, yeah, I mean, those are the realities that you kind of learn after like diving into it that you don't expect at the start. So it was dramatically different. And I've learned in some ways to balance it. You know, you come home, you put the phone away, you turn it off, you put the computer down. And, but that's been something that I've had to like really kind of work on personally over a number of years to try to, have a, you know, a lifestyle that's also balanced with running the company. But I also feel like I'm playing every day. Like I never feel like I'm getting up and like, oh, I got to go to work today. You know, this is what I love to do. So I'm happy to do it. It doesn't feel like work, like, you know, clocking in, clocking out does.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a funny one. One of the things I always come back to, and I'd love to know if this impacted you at all, going from traveling for a number of years, and I was only away for 2, but that is one of the things I think helped me the most in running a business, because it teaches you some really good principles of like less is more in a lot of ways. Like you only put in the backpack what you can carry. Like if you buy one thing, you got to get rid of one thing. It's like, and very much that ethos of, and I'm not just saying this, but like the lifestyle over luxury thing was something that I just, as soon as I found it, I put it on all of those Instagram posts for years, because it was like, I was like, there's something about that phrase. I was like, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. And then carrying that into a business has been really interesting of like, there's not a TV in our house. We don't own a car. I don't wear a watch. Like the clothes that we're in, like I bought this like 5 years ago, but I take care of it and it still works, you know? So there's a lot of that stuff of to live a lifestyle where you get a degree of freedom. And for me, that's just freedom to do what I want to do and that solve the problems I want to solve in the way I want to solve them. Like if I want to start a morning show, I can, because no boss is like, well, if you start at 8, what's the ROI of this morning show? Like, no, I like it. It's fun, you know, and it helps people. People message me like, wow, that was amazing. That guest inspired me to start this. I'm like, cool. Like it's fun to be able to give yourself that freedom and not have to limit it, but also to be able to say those principles of traveling of, you know, you've got to be aware of your budget. Like travelers know almost to the dollar how much money's in their bank account. And Absolutely. It's amazing. Like if you go to someone in the street, not always, but if you're like, how much money do you actually have? Most people, I used this principle once to do a fundraiser. And I was like, tell me how much money's in your bank account. And if your estimate is below what it is, I'd like you to donate 10% of the difference. And it was amazing. People will be like, and if you're listening at home right now, have a guess, write it down on a piece of paper. How much money do you think you actually have today, right now? Write it down. And then go to your bank account and look at the delta. And just like the difference above or below is striking. Like we're never very aware of that. And in so many businesses, like if you don't know your cash flow, like if you don't know how much money's in the bank, how much you're earning, like you got to know that stuff to the dollar.
That's another thing. Business owners, especially startups, get really hung up on P&L statements. And I mean, that's like, I mean, it's important, but like, forget about that. Focus on your cash flow. That's the only thing that matters for the first 2 years, unless you plan on financing or, you know, funding the majority of your burn rate, you know? So I mean, and traveling kind of teaches you that in some respect, you know, the last, like, you know, the startup years of a company, you're going to be lean, you're going to make maybe make not a lot of money. You know, there's obviously cases where people, you know, businesses take off, but for the most part, the stories that I know, the stories of my friends and business community and mentors, you know, they were willing to live on, you know, way less than minimum wage per hour of work. So, but at the end of the day, they got to put in the hard yards. You got to do your 3 to 5 years. And at the end of it, you know, if you make the right decisions and maybe there's not a global pandemic, you'll be in a great spot.
I love it.
Yeah.
Jeff, I know you've got a lot to get on with as you've shared with us. Tell us about the future, the rest of 2020, what's that sort of roadmap ahead look like for you guys? Is there a launch that you're excited about? Obviously, you're coming into summer in Canada at the moment, which is exciting. What's on the horizon for LL Supply right now?
Yeah, so I mean, as many of us, we're navigating our way through this COVID situation, which is, thrown a spanner in the works for a lot of our plans for this year. So we're managing through that. We do have a launch coming up. So we developed a patented fabric that is made from recycled post-consumer waste. So as I mentioned, we're always using primarily using pre-consumer waste to create clothing. What our ultimate goal has always been is to be able to have a completely circular model. So, you as a customer, like that shirt you've been wearing for 5 years, eventually that is going to reach the end of its life cycle. And right now that means it gets donated, maybe if it's in good enough shape. Other than that, it gets wasted. And I mean, this amounts to billions and billions of pounds of clothing every year, especially as it's become so much of like a commodity, in life. So our goal has always been to offer a completely circular model where you can buy clothing from us. It's made from recycled or upcycled materials. You wear it for, 2, 3, 5 years, however long the garment lasts you. And when you're done with it, you return it to us and we will shred it and turn it into new material, which will be made into new clothing. So I've been working on this for a little bit over 2 years now. And we've reached a point where it's feasible. So we patented the fabric, which is 90% recyclable. So when you return it to us, we will recover 90% of the original material and make it into a new garment.
Amazing.
Yeah. So this was intended to launch at the end of the year this year, but as I said, bit of a spanner in the works with this whole COVID situation. So I think it's being pushed until probably like early next summer. Or beginning of next year. So we'll do like our regular launches of our upcycled stuff for the remainder of the year. And then I'm really excited to get that going and launch the whole circular model with the return program. And yeah, that's been a long journey for that. So I'm really stoked to get it to market.
No doubt, mate. Amazing. And if people are interested, if people are tuned in today and they're like, cool, I want to grab some product, I want to check this stuff out, I want to support everything that Jeff and the team are doing, where's a great place for them to go if they're picking up their 10th garment or their first?
Yeah, so everything runs off llsupply.ca. All the products are there. Journals there too. We got a pretty rad little journal section with a lot of articles as well on if you're interested in learning about more ethical clothing manufacturing, the processes, a little bit behind the scenes. One of the things our company really tries to do is sort of like lift the curtain on the apparel industry. So we're super transparent about what all of our garments cost us to make, what we pay our manufacturing staff, what's typically paid, some of the problems with manufacturing overseas and some of the problems with, made in Canada or Australia products. And so there's a lot of information on the journal to dive into if that's something that you're interested in. And then, llsupply.ca for all the products. And always appreciate your support. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out, send us a note. Our staff always loves answering questions, or it'll come through to me if you have any questions about the podcast or show today. I'm happy to answer.
Awesome. Jeff, mate, you're amazing. Thank you for being so generous with your time, and nice to finally get some face-to-face time with you after all these years.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome. And great to finally meet you. Meet you as well. And no doubt we will very soon, hopefully somewhere on the West Coast. So I look forward to that as well. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Mate, likewise. Thanks for coming on. And thank you everyone for listening today. This has been episode number 39 of Coffee with Campus Consultancy. As always, we'd love to know what you think. Please send me a message, whether it's a comment below, shoot me a message on LinkedIn, email, Facebook, whatever, it all works. And make sure you're following along some of the socials. Check out the store of LL Supply. It's been shared and all the URLs are at the top. Check them out on Instagram as well. It's at LLS or LL Supply, at LL Supply. And if you're curious about anything we've talked about today, please reach out. And think about when you're looking at your career pathway, some of the concepts we've talked about today, finding something that lives out your values, solving a real problem that you've experienced, leaning into working with someone who's already doing the thing that you're interested in to learn from them and lean on that experience. And then most importantly, thinking about the impact that your work and your products and services you put into the world actually have.
So thank you very much for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow for episode number 40. A lot of love rolling in for you here, Jeff. Appreciate your time. And we'll see you all tomorrow morning for another episode of Coffee with Campus Consultancy. Bye all.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Jeff.